If you asked my older sister Adeline, she would tell you I died 6 years ago. Not literally. Of course, I didn't stop breathing or disappear off the grid. But in the version of our family's history she likes to recite, I ceased to exist the moment I refused to bail her out one last time. She looked me straight in the eyes at our father's funeral, surrounded by black coats, drooping flowers, and the faint hum of condolences, and said, "You're dead to me." Then she turned and walked off as though the scene had been choreographed for her benefit alone. That was the last time I saw her until last Saturday. My name is Sandra Martinez. I'm 34 and I've spent most of the past decade doing what people always say you should do, cutting out toxicity. The hard part no one mentions is what happens after the cut. Sometimes the silence burns just as much as the wounds that came before it. For as long as I can remember, my sister Adeline has been the golden child of our family, the kind of woman who walks into a room and acts as if the air rearranges itself just to suit her. She was always loud, dazzling, dramatic, glittering in every spotlight, even the ones she created out of thin air. She knew how to charm strangers, captivate relatives, and most importantly, manipulate our mother. Growing up, fairness in our house wasn't exactly a rule. It wasn't even a guideline. It was a distant rumor that never quite made it inside our front door. When Adeline skipped 3 exams in high school because she wasn't in the right headspace, she got taken out to lunch for a pep talk. When I got 1 B+ in a sea of A's, Mom asked if I was losing focus. When Adeline crashed Dad's car at 26, she was under stress. When I asked why she didn't pay rent while living at home at 28, I was being disrespectful. That was the dynamic. Ridiculous, exhausting, predictable. So I left at 19, dragging a duffel bag, a scholarship, and more determination than confidence. I worked part-time jobs, cleaned offices at night, tutored freshman algebra, and chipped away at my degree. I built a modest life for myself, small but stable, a quiet apartment, a marketing position. I was proud of routines that kept me grounded. I even started dating a man named Evan, a calm, observant person who seemed to sense when I needed silence more than conversation. Meanwhile, Adeline bounced from one unstable job to another, cycling through boyfriends, business opportunities, and impulsive plans that never lived long enough to bear responsibility. She had a talent for monetizing chaos, just not in a sustainable way. The first time she asked me for money, I wasn't surprised she asked. I was surprised she said please. She told me she just needed a little help to get her new venture off the ground, something about client outreach software and an investor pipeline. I didn't understand a word of it, but she was my sister, so I gave her $4,000. Not because I believed in her idea, not because I trusted her with the money, but because a part of me, small, stubborn, naive, hoped. This was the moment she finally grew up. She burned through it in 2 months, ghosted me for 3, and resurfaced only to ask for more. This time I said no, and that no was apparently unforgivable, because days later at Dad's funeral, she delivered her final line to me like we were actors on a stage. "You're dead to me." In the aftermath, my mother took her side without hesitation. "She's grieving," she insisted. She didn't mean it, but she did, and Mom knew it. Still, she chose the daughter. She could not bear to disappoint, not the one who never asked for anything. After that, holidays went on without me. Text chains died. Invitations stopped. Only silence remained, and I accepted it. I focused on work. I kept my distance. I healed. Or at least I thought I did. Then, last November, a letter arrived. Not a text, not an email. A physical envelope, cream-colored and unnecessarily dramatic, sealed like it carried diplomatic secrets. The handwriting was unmistakable. Adeline always wrote like a person who believed some museum would archive her grocery lists someday. Inside was a carefully orchestrated performance, an apology wrapped in flattery, wrapped in guilt. She said her business had collapsed. Her rent was overdue. Her fiancé, yes, she had one now, was under pressure. She needed a small loan to stabilize everything. "You're the only one in the family who's stable right now," she wrote. "You've always been so much smarter than me. Please help me just this once." Evan was the one who pointed out the manipulation. "That's not a request," he said. "That's a trap covered in compliments." He wasn't wrong. Still, I couldn't throw the letter away. 2 months passed. Then, out of nowhere, my cousin Lauren called. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Hey, I don't know how to say this, but Adeline's engagement party is this Saturday. And she's been telling people you cut the family off because you tried to ruin her relationship. She's saying you showed up drunk at the funeral and made a scene. I felt my stomach twist. What, Lauren, you were there? I didn't even raise my voice. I know, she said. But people believe her. You should hear it from me before you see it online. After she hung up, I sat alone in my living room, my hands cold, my thoughts louder than any argument. I thought of the letter buried in my drawer. I thought of all the years Adeline had rewritten our family history to suit herself. I thought of the relentless heavy ache of never being believed. And then something shifted inside me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a dramatic confrontation. I didn't want to break anything. Not the party, not her engagement, not whatever fragile illusion my mother still clung to. I just wanted the truth to land where it belonged. So I made a decision. I would go to that engagement party, not as a hurricane, not as a ghost, but as the one person Adeline never expected to show up with evidence she wrote in her own handwriting. I chose a simple dark dress. I folded her letter neatly, and on a small yellow sticky note in precise block letters, I wrote, "She deserves to know." Then I sealed the envelope addressed to her fiancée, Bridget Hale, and set it on the table beside my keys. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, my chest tight, but my resolve steady. I rehearsed nothing in my head. I imagined no scenes. I simply prepared. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up, and I was done being dead. I arrived at the venue 20 minutes after the official start time, not to be dramatic, but because timing is a kind of quiet strategy. Early enough that the party was in full swing, late enough that my entrance wouldn't blend into the trickle of guests still arriving. The event space, a renovated warehouse called the Copper Vine, had that curated industrial charm, exposed brick walls, tall windows, Edison bulbs dangling like suspended fireflies, and a floor polished to a reflective sheen. The kind of place Adeline gravitated to for the optics. Inside, the music was soft, elegant, the kind of instrumental pieces meant to make everyone feel more expensive than they actually were. Trays of hors d'oeuvres floated between clusters of people wrapped in silk dresses and tailored suits. Laughter chimed in waves, bright, practiced, polite. I took a breath and adjusted the envelope in my hand. It felt heavier than the paper inside should allow. For the first few moments, no one noticed me. That was almost comforting, being anonymous, in a room that once belonged to a family that insisted I was the difficult one, the guilty one, the problem. A few heads turned as I passed, but only with vague curiosity, the way people glance at someone who seems familiar but can't be placed. Then, over the heads of the crowd, I saw her. Adeline stood at the center of the room, like a carefully positioned centerpiece glowing under warm light, her hair sculpted into effortless waves that probably took 2 hours to achieve. She wore a white satin jumpsuit with a plunging neckline, as always teetering on the line between elegance and theatrics. Her hand rested on the arm of her fiancée, Bridget Hale, who was speaking politely to an older couple. Bridget was beautiful in a composed, understated way, dark hair pinned neatly tasteful, emerald dress posture that instantly signaled intelligence. Her expression was warm and attentive until Adeline glanced over her shoulder and locked eyes with me. I watched the transformation happen in an instant. Surprise, then confusion, then an almost imperceptible flicker of dread. It smoothed over quickly, replaced by that signature smile she had perfected since childhood, the kind that could gloss over any crack in her facade. She whispered into Bridget's ear. Bridget turned her brows, lifting slightly at the sight of me. A stranger arriving uninvited. A variable Adeline hadn't prepared her for. I walked toward them, steady and unhurried. My mother intercepted me halfway there, faster than I expected, considering she was wearing heels high enough to qualify as a hazard. "Sandra," she whispered sharply, grabbing my arm. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Her grip was tight enough to reveal that she wasn't just surprised, she was afraid. Not of me, of what my presence represented. I looked at her hand before I answered. "I'm here because this is a family event," I said. "And I am family." "You weren't invited," she hissed, scanning the room as if anyone might overhear. I didn't realize invitations were required to attend my own sister's engagement. I kept my tone even. "Is that new? You're antagonizing her. You're antagonizing all of us." "Mom," I said quietly, "I am not here to cause a scene. I just want to speak to Bridget for a moment." Her expression tightened further. "Sandra, don't do this. Not tonight." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "If everything is as perfect as you pretend, you have nothing to worry about." She blinked, and that brief moment of hesitation, just a flicker, was all the confirmation I needed. She knew. On some level, she always had. But Adeline was the daughter she couldn't afford to lose, so truth had become optional. I continued toward Adeline and Bridget. The air seemed to shift around me. Conversations dipped in volume. Eyes lifted. People sensed something not wrong, but different. Adeline was smiling by the time I reached them, though the strain beneath it was undeniable. "Sandra," she said with a cool brightness. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were back in town." "I didn't know I'd left," I replied. Her jaw twitched. Bridget, ever poised, extended a polite hand. "Hi, I'm Bridget. It's nice to meet you." "You too," I said. "Congratulations on your engagement." Adeline stepped slightly in front of her fiancé, as though trying to shield her. "Look, Sandra," she murmured. "This really isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said, lifting the envelope. "This is for you, Bridget." Bridget glanced at the envelope, reading her own name in the handwriting I had written as neatly as possible. Her eyes softened with curiosity. "What is it?" "What?" "A letter," I said. "From Adeline, written last November." The color drained from Adeline's face. She reached out quickly. "Bridget, don't. She's twisting something. It's not what you think." "Let her answer," I said calmly. Bridget's gaze flicked between us, the cool, analytical look of someone who was weighing possibilities. "Adeline, what is this?" "It's nothing," Adeline insisted. "Just a misunderstanding Sandra is trying to stir up." "It's real," I said, my voice steady. "She asked me for money. She said she was under enormous pressure and that you needed help. She said I was the only one stable enough to rescue her." There was a ripple of murmurs behind us. A few guests pretended not to listen while absolutely listening. Adeline's composure cracked. "Bridget, she's lying. She's always been jealous." "I don't care about jealousy," Bridget said quietly. "I care about honesty." She bent slightly and lifted the envelope. "I'll read it." Adeline grabbed her wrist, not hard, but firm. "Bridget, don't embarrass me, please." Bridget froze. Something in her expression changed, not anger, but clarity. She pulled her hand back. "Don't touch me," she said softly. Adeline stepped back, stunned. My mother materialized beside us, her face flushed. "Sandra, enough. Stop humiliating your sister. This is her night." "This isn't humiliation," I said. "It's truth. You've always wanted to make her look bad." "No," I said. "She did that herself." Adeline's voice rose, brittle, trembling. "You think you're better than me? Because you have your little job and your little apartment and your little boyfriend. You always act like you're some moral authority." "Adeline," I interrupted, "you said it yourself at the funeral." Her mouth closed, her eyes blazed. "I'm dead to you," I said. "So why does me showing up threaten you so much?" Two of Adeline's friends hovered nearby, uncertain whether they should intervene. Someone across the room lifted a phone. Someone else gasped. Bridget clutched the envelope to her chest. "I need to read this," she whispered. "We'll talk later." And with that, she walked away, moving through the crowd with quiet determination. Adeline's arms fell to her sides, trembling. My mother shouted my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to stay for the implosion. It had already begun. I turned toward the exit and walked out, passing through the warm glow of the chandeliers into the cold night air. I expected relief triumph, something satisfying. But instead my chest felt hollow. Because I realized for the first time that truth alone doesn't heal everything. And that the deepest betrayal of this story hadn't happened yet. When I stepped out of the copper vine, the air outside felt colder than it should have been. It wasn't the kind of cold that came from weather. It was the kind that comes after adrenaline drains from your body, leaving your nerves exposed and searching for equilibrium. I walked for several blocks before I even noticed where I was, my thoughts looping quietly like film reels that refused to shut off. Everything about the confrontation replayed itself. Adeline's face twisting in panic. My mother's desperation to maintain appearances, Bridget's steady voice as she said, "Don't touch me." Every detail echoed with the weight of something inevitable, something that had been building for years. When I got home, Evan was already asleep. I didn't wake him. I didn't know how to talk about what had happened without unraveling into someone I didn't want him to see, someone brittle, someone raw. Instead, I went to the kitchen, fed my cat Luna, and sat at the table, staring at nothing. The envelope was gone from my purse, but its ghost lingered on the wooden surface where I placed my elbows. I told myself I'd feel relief, closure, some vindication. But instead, there was a hollow quiet inside me, a widening space I didn't know how to fill. I had delivered the truth, and yet I felt more emptied than empowered. The next morning, my phone lit up with a single notification, an unknown number leaving a voicemail. Probably spam, I thought. But something about the timing made my chest tighten. I ignored it and went about the day in a fog. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and tried to focus on campaign drafts, deadlines, client emails. My mind refused to cooperate. By lunchtime, I still hadn't eaten. I made myself a sandwich, took 2 bites, and abandoned it. Even Luna noticed. She followed me around with the quiet persistence of a creature who senses imbalance before humans do. By Tuesday, my exhaustion had settled into something deeper. My limbs felt heavier, my thoughts slower. Work piled up unanswered. Evan noticed I was slipping, though he didn't press me. He's gentle like that, patient enough to wait, supportive enough to stay close without suffocating me. I kept thinking about the engagement party, about how the room had gone silent when Bridget took the envelope, how Adeline's expression fell apart under her own lies, how my mother's scolding voice cracked in panic. But mostly I thought about how no one had called me. No apology, no attempt at understanding, no acknowledgement of the truth I had placed literally into Bridget's hands. It stung more than I wanted it to. On Wednesday afternoon, my mother finally texted. 4 words that managed to slice cleaner than any argument. You've done enough damage. Not a question, not an invitation to talk, not even curiosity about the truth. Just an accusation. As if my existence were destructive. As if telling the truth had ruined something that wasn't already rotting. As if Adeline had never wrecked anything at all. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Then I blocked her number. It was impulsive, but it felt like placing a boundary I should have drawn a decade ago. Still, the silence that followed had its own weight. I found myself opening old folders on my laptop that I hadn't looked at in years. Family photos, screenshots of birthday invitations. I never received pictures of my father before illness took its final toll. There were messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to since the funeral, snapshots from holidays I wasn't invited to. Scrolling through them, I felt something strange guilt, though I knew logically it wasn't mine to carry. When you grow up as the child who always does the right thing, you get conditioned to believe that if something breaks, you must be the one who caused the fracture, even when you didn't. That night, I dreamed of my father. The dream wasn't vivid, more like a quiet memory, replaying through fog. He sat at the dining table, sipping terrible instant coffee from the chipped mug he refused to replace. He looked at me the way he always did when he wanted to say something important but simple. "You have nothing to prove," he said. When I woke, tears were already sliding down my face. I took it as a sign. Something needed to change, and it had to start with me. The next morning, I woke early, showered, made myself a real breakfast. I cleaned the kitchen, I brushed Luna's fur, I opened my laptop and finally tackled the emails that had been stacking up like small accusations. One by one, I answered them. Then I reopened a stalled campaign draft and worked through it until I could feel myself returning to something familiar. Competence, confidence, a sense of direction. By afternoon, I texted Evan, "Thank you for being patient with me. I'm trying." He responded almost immediately, "You don't have to try alone. I'm here, always." It didn't fix everything, but it steadied something inside me. Later that week, I received another envelope in the mail. The handwriting on the front was neat and flowing, not Adeline's dramatic cursive. For a moment, I didn't dare hope, but when I opened it, there was only a single sheet of paper. Sandra. I read the letter, all of it. I'm not sure what I expected, but the truth hit harder than I thought it would. Thank you for giving me the chance to see what I almost committed to. For doing what no one else around her ever seemed willing to do. I don't know what happens next with her or with me, but I wanted you to know that I see you and I'm sorry for how you've been treated. Bridget. I read it twice, then a third time. It was the first acknowledgement in years from anyone connected to my family that I hadn't imagined the imbalance, that the pain was real, that what I had endured wasn't some overreaction or misinterpretation. Someone finally saw it, someone who had no reason to defend me or lie. That letter cracked something open, something fragile, something healing. By spring, I felt steadier. My energy returned slowly but surely. I poured myself into work and was rewarded for it. I earned a promotion, took on a new set of clients, and began mentoring one of our younger coordinators. I bought new furniture for my apartment, rearranged the living room, even started going on morning walks with Evan. It wasn't dramatic, just steady. Then, one warm afternoon, I opened my mailbox to find another envelope. This time the handwriting was unmistakable. Adeline. Inside, there were 2 things, a wedding invitation and a check for $4,000. The memo line read, "I guess I still owe you." But that wasn't what made my pulse spike. The invitation wasn't for a wedding to Bridget. It was for a wedding to someone named Camille Hart, in my mother's backyard. And the envelope addressed to me said only one thing guessed. Not sister of the bride, not family, just a name on a list. I held the card for a long time, feeling a cold clarity form in my chest. This story wasn't finished. Not even close. For 2 full days, I left the wedding invitation sitting on my coffee table like it was some kind of bomb that might detonate if I touched it again. Every time I walked past it, my eyes flicked to that one word guessed, printed in gold foil, as if dressing up the insult made it less cruel. The more I stared at it, the more absurd it felt. After everything Adeline had done, she wanted me seated politely in a chair, smiling on command, while she rewrote her life yet again. But insult wasn't the only emotion simmering underneath. There was something else, something that made my stomach tighten the moment I read the name Camille Hart. A new fiancé, so soon after Bridget, so soon after the truth. I couldn't ignore this pattern anymore. Adeline always moved faster than accountability could catch her. Faster than guilt, faster than consequences, faster than the fallout she left behind. When one story collapsed, she simply abandoned the rubble and sprinted toward another narrative she could control. But the part that gnawed at me was this: did Camille know anything? Did she have any idea who she was marrying? Or was she, like so many before, caught in the gravitational pull of Adeline's charisma and oblivious to the debris field behind her? I hated the idea of another woman waking up years from now, wondering why her world kept shrinking around Adeline's needs. I hated the idea of history repeating itself simply because no one had warned her. And I hated quietly, privately, that my mother would host that wedding in the same backyard where my father once grilled burgers while Adeline strutted through life without consequences. It was the last part that made something inside me settle firmly into place. I wasn't done, not if it meant someone else might suffer in my silence. So I started looking into Camille. Her social media pages were carefully curated: sunlit brunches, event planning shots, motivational captions, a few staged photos of her apartment where light filtered through tall city windows. She was young, maybe late 20s, friendly looking, ambitious, and from what I could gather, relatively new to the city. Her posts about Adeline were few. 2 pictures total. No over-the-top engagement announcement. No ring close-up. No emotional caption about soulmates. It didn't fit Adeline's usual patterns. If she had truly locked down someone new, she would have flooded social media with proof. The silence around this engagement felt intentional. Too intentional. I dug deeper, searching for connections. That's when I found a photo from 6 months ago of Camille and Bridget at a networking event. They weren't close friends, but they knew each other. They moved in overlapping circles. And then, nothing. Their online interactions stopped cold. Just like that, as if someone had pressed a delete button. I stared at the screen long enough that Luna jumped onto my lap, meowing in irritation at my stillness. I stroked her absent-mindedly, feeling the pieces click into place. For Camille to disappear so suddenly from Bridget's online orbit, for Adeline to move on so quickly, for the wedding to be so rushed. No, something wasn't right. I needed answers from the one person who understood the pattern best. So I reached out to Bridget. Finding her wasn't difficult. I still remembered the name of the pharmaceutical company she worked for thanks to a LinkedIn brag post my cousin had shown me before the implosion. Her email was listed on the company website. My message was simple. Hi, Bridget. I hope this message finds you well. I know things were chaotic the last time our lives intersected, and I understand completely if you'd prefer not to talk. But I just learned that Adeline is getting married again, and soon. I can't help but wonder what her new fiancé has been told or not told. If you're willing to talk even just briefly, I would really appreciate it. Sandra. I didn't expect a reply, not quickly at least. But 2 days later, she wrote back. Sandra. Thank you for reaching out. You're not wrong to be concerned. I'm free to meet this Saturday if you'd like. There's a coffee place in Midtown I visit often. Let me know. Bridget. Saturday arrived, and I found myself sitting across from her in a quiet cafe filled with amber light and the low hum of espresso machines. Bridget looked different than she had at the engagement party. Softer, but stronger somehow, like someone who had walked through fire and learned she wouldn't burn so easily again. She ordered chamomile tea. I ordered black coffee. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "Thank you for meeting me." "I had a feeling you would reach out," she replied, "especially once I heard about Camille." "So you know her?" "Not well," she said, stirring her tea. "She joined a networking group I was part of. Smart, sweet, eager to make her mark. I always liked her." "Do you think she knows anything I asked?" "No," Bridget said softly. "Because if she did, she wouldn't be marrying Adeline." We talked for an hour. about Adeline's charm, her manipulation, the way she reinvented herself constantly, the long trail of emotional shrapnel she left behind. Bridget admitted that leaving the engagement had been painful, but also freeing, like stepping out of a tightening grip she hadn't fully recognized until someone else presented her with evidence. "We can't let this happen again," I said. Bridget looked at me over the rim of her cup and a wry smile flickered. You told me you saw me," I said, "and I see you too. Camille deserves truth, not illusion. We shouldn't sit back while Adeline drags someone else in." Bridget leaned back, considering. "I agree." And that was how our unlikely alliance began. Over the next week, I quietly gathered everything: screenshots of Adeline's previous messages, photos of her letter begging for money, old texts where she tried to pit family members against each other. Bridget contributed her own evidence: voicemails, conversations, receipts, details only someone who had been engaged to Adeline could know. Together we wrote a letter to Camille. Not an attack, not a dramatic confession, just honesty. Specific, calm, factual. A mirror Adeline could not distort. Bridget arranged for a mutual friend, a woman still on the guest list, to slip the letter into Camille's bridal suite the morning of the wedding. It was elegant, strategic, surgical, quiet enough that no one could accuse us of spectacle, precise enough that the truth would land exactly where it needed to. As we finalized the plan, Bridget exhaled slowly. "You know this won't make Adeline better," she said. "People don't change just because their lies are exposed." "I know," I replied, "but it might stop the damage." "And what about your family?" she asked gently. "Your mother?" "My mother made her choices a long time ago," I said. "But this isn't about them anymore. It's about closure. It's about not letting patterns become legacies." Bridget nodded. "Then let's do it." And just like that, the truth finally had a delivery system Adeline couldn't intercept. All that was left was the wedding, the day everything would unravel. The morning of the wedding started with a strange stillness, the kind that felt almost staged, like the world was holding its breath. I woke early, long before my alarm, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling while sunlight slipped quietly through the blinds. Evan stirred beside me, turning toward me with a sleepy murmur. "You okay?" he asked, his voice thick with drowsiness. "I am," I said softly. "Really. I think today is just a turning point." He nodded, half asleep, but reached out to squeeze my hand. He didn't ask for details. He already knew this wasn't a day I could explain in a sentence. I got ready, slowly choosing a navy dress with clean lines, simple, respectful, but firm. I wanted to look composed, not vengeful. I wasn't there to start a fire. I was there to stop one. As I drove toward my mother's house, the same one where Adeline and I spent our entire childhood, I felt a familiar pressure building in my chest. The street looked the same as always. Tidy lawns, sun-faded mailboxes, small trees, planted by neighbors who believed they could make an ordinary street feel hopeful. But the memories stirred more than ease. This wasn't home anymore. It was the set where a crooked story had played out for too long. Cars lined both sides of the street. Guests wandered toward the backyard dressed in pastel dresses and summer suits. Soft instrumental music floated over the fence, drifting into the quiet suburban morning. I parked halfway down the block and took a breath so long it hurt. My father used to tell me, "Walk in like you belong because you do." Whether he knew how much that advice would matter later, I'll never know. I stepped out of the car and adjusted my dress, trying to ignore the tremble in my hands. I wasn't nervous about seeing Adeline, not anymore, but the gravity of everything, the letter, the truth, the finality pulled at me in ways I wasn't fully prepared for. When I reached the front yard, I paused. The wind chime still hung from the porch, the same one Dad installed. The summer before Adeline crashed his car and blamed it on me. Its sound was faint in the breeze light and crystalline, almost mocking in its familiarity. As guests drifted around the side of the house, I walked forward. Some glanced at me with brief confusion, wondering why they didn't recognize me. Others recognized me a bit too well and quickly looked away. I entered the backyard, and for a moment it felt like stepping into a photograph. Rows of white chairs curved gracefully toward an altar draped in roses. Lanterns hung from tree branches. The grass was perfectly trimmed. Everything was styled as if the wedding planner had been handed a mood board titled Ethereal Garden Elegance. My mother stood near the front row, fussing with a ribbon on one of the chairs. Her face was tight with concentration or anxiety, probably both. When she turned and spotted me, her expression froze entirely. "Oh," she breathed as though she'd been slapped by the sight of me. "Sandra, you Came. You sent an invitation, I said. Her jaw tightened. I wasn't sure you would accept it. That seems to be the theme lately, I replied quietly. She glanced around, lowering her voice. Please, don't do anything disruptive. Adeline is very fragile today. Nothing that happens today, I said, will be because of me. She studied me for a beat, searching for hostility or maybe for guilt. She found neither. With a tight nod, she stepped aside. I took a seat near the back, the seat marked guest, the label. Feeling strangely fitting now, people whispered. A few turned to look. I ignored them and focused on the altar, watching petals shift gently in the breeze. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The officiant checked his watch. The music looped awkwardly. Guests exchanged confused glances. And then the French doors of the house opened. A hush fell over the entire yard. Camille stepped into view. But she wasn't wearing a wedding dress. Instead, she wore a deep green sundress, the kind someone might wear to brunch or an afternoon walk. Her hair was down, not styled, not curled, just natural. She held no bouquet. She carried no illusion. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but her posture told the story. Something had broken open. As she walked towards the altar, guests shifted restlessly, sensing a crack in the perfect facade. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. Bridesmaids exchanged worried looks. Camille reached the front, removed her sunglasses, and tucked them into her bag. Her eyes were red-rimmed, not frantic, not panicked, just tired, devastated in a way that wasn't messy, but resolute. Thank you all for being here, she said, her voice clear but strained. I know this isn't what any of you expected to hear. It's not what I expected either. No one breathed. There won't be a wedding today. Gasps swept across the lawn like a wave. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Another guest whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath. Camille scanned the crowd not with shame, but clarity, a woman seeing through fog for the first time. I thought I knew the person I was about to marry, she said. But I didn't. I thought I was entering a partnership. I wasn't. I thought I was loved. I wasn't. She reached into her small bag and removed a folded letter, the letter Bridget had written. This was left for me this morning. From someone who had been where I stood. Someone who had seen patterns I didn't want to recognize in my own life. My heart beat painfully as she continued. And they were right. Before anyone could react further, the side gate burst open and Adeline appeared, breathless, still wearing the wedding gown she'd chosen, a dramatic mermaid silhouette with lace sleeves, and a train that trailed like a declaration of her importance. She looked around wildly until her eyes landed on Camille. "What are you doing?" Adeline demanded, her voice sharper than the sudden quiet. Camille didn't flinch. "I'm ending this," she said simply. "You're being manipulated," Adeline hissed, pointing at her. "By her." She swung her gaze toward me with venom. "By Sandra. This is exactly what she wanted." Camille shook her head calmly. "This has nothing to do with Sandra, or anyone else. This is about you." "You don't know what you're doing," Adeline snapped, stepping closer. "We can talk about this inside." "No," Camille said. "We can't." She reached for her hand, pulled off the engagement ring, and placed it gently on the grass beside the altar. The symbolism was surgical. "This is yours," Camille said. "The lies are yours. The consequences are yours." Adeline's face contorted anger, humiliation, disbelief. She looked out at the guests as if searching for someone to rescue her narrative. But no one stepped forward, not even our mother. Without another word, Camille turned and began walking toward the gate. I stood as she approached. She paused beside me, her expression softening. "You came," she said quietly. "I wasn't going to miss the truth," I replied. She let out a faint, exhausted laugh. "Tell Bridget, thank you." "I will." Then she walked away, sunlight catching the edges of her hair as she disappeared down the driveway. Behind us, chaos erupted. My mother ran to Adeline. Adeline began shouting. Guests scattered. Whispers thickened in the air. I didn't look back. I stepped out of the yard, out of the noise, breathing in air that felt too light and too heavy at the same time. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not vindication, not revenge, but clarity. Crystal sharp and long overdue. The truth had finally outgrown the lies. In the hours after Camille walked away, the fallout began to spread like a quiet shockwave. I knew it would. Adeline was never the kind of person who let a narrative die without a fight, but I didn't linger. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away from the house that had shaped me and scarred me in equal measure. The wind chime on the porch rattled behind me as I left. It sounded strangely like a closing chapter. By that evening, my phone began buzzing. Messages came in from numbers I recognized, but hadn't seen in years. Cousins. distant relatives, people who once believed every version of a story Adeline fed them. Some texts were hesitant, some apologetic, some dancing around the truth as if they were afraid to say it outright. "Are you okay? I heard what happened. I'm sorry we didn't know. We should have asked you sooner." But the message that stopped me and made me sit down on the edge of my bed was from an unlisted number. She walked. Good. I didn't need a signature. It was Bridget. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because the message didn't need anything back. It was complete in itself, an acknowledgement, a handshake from someone who understood the terrain I'd been trudging for years. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, the quiet settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was clean, spacious, like stepping into a room I didn't realize had been cluttered until everything inside it was finally removed. For a week, things were peaceful. I cooked dinner with Evan, took Luna on lazy, aimless walks around the block, where the air smelled like early summer. I still thought about the wedding sometimes, but not with regret. More with disbelief that it had finally happened, that the cycle had finally been interrupted. Then on Thursday, my receptionist knocked on my office door. "Sandra," she said, poking her head inside, "your mother is here." I froze. It had been years since she'd come to see me unannounced. Years since she'd stepped into my world without Adeline directing the narrative. For a moment, I thought about telling the receptionist to say I was in a meeting, but I knew avoiding her would only delay the inevitable. "Send her in," I said. My mother entered slowly, almost cautiously. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. Her usual crisp posture had softened. Her shoulders dropped slightly, as if she'd finally grown tired of holding up the weight of an image that had cracked openly just days earlier. "Sandra," she said quietly. "Mom." She sat across from me, smoothing her skirt with nervous fingers. It took her several seconds to look up. "I don't really know what to say," she began. "Everything happened so fast." "Fast," I repeated gently. Or did it just finally catch up to her? She flinched, not in anger, but in understanding. "I wanted to protect her," she said. "I always thought if I supported her enough, she would change. She would grow out of it." "And what about me?" I asked softly. "Who protected me?" Her eyes glassed over, but she blinked them clear. "I thought you didn't need protecting. You were always strong, always responsible. You never demanded anything." "That wasn't strength," I said. "That was survival." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. "I see that now." Her voice wavered. "And I'm sorry, truly." It wasn't a full apology, not for everything. Not for the years of imbalance. Not for the nights I lay awake wondering why my best was never enough. But it was the closest she had ever come. And somehow that was enough to release something inside me I didn't realize I'd still been holding. "I'm not asking you to take sides," I said. "I'm just asking you to see the truth." She nodded slowly. "I do now, more than I ever have." We sat in silence for a while. Not strained, not hostile, just quiet. A bridge neither of us had expected to cross, forming plank by plank. When she finally stood to leave, she reached out and touched my hand lightly. "You were never the problem," she said. No fireworks, no tears, just truth, simple and soft. After she left, I sat alone at my desk and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since childhood. The next 6 months unfolded gently, almost unexpectedly. My relationship with Evan deepened. My world steadied. I threw myself into work not as an escape, but as an expression of a life I was finally shaping on my own terms. Our agency brought on 2 new clients. I mentored a junior designer who reminded me of myself before life taught me that quiet doesn't mean weak. One afternoon in late summer, I came home to find an envelope tucked between my front door and the welcome mat. No return address. Simple white stationery. My heart murmured in recognition before I even opened it. Inside was a postcard. A photograph of a mountain range under a wide, endless sky. On the back, written in familiar looping handwriting, were 5 words. "You deserve your own peace. Bridget." I read it twice, then pinned it to my bulletin board above my desk. Not as a trophy, not as a reminder of Adeline, but as a symbol of the quiet alliances that form when truth is finally allowed to breathe. As months passed, life didn't magically transform. There were still echoes of the past old wounds that would take time to heal, but there was a new clarity inside me, a new understanding of where I ended and where the world expected me to begin. And the best part, I no longer felt dead in a narrative someone else wrote for me. I was alive in my choices, in my voice, in the way I protected the parts of myself I once buried. Now, when people ask about my family, I don't freeze, I don't panic, I don't lie. I simply say they're part of my story, but not the part that defines me. And every time I think back to that day, Camille standing before a sea of stunned guests, Bridget stepping into the light of her own courage, my mother finally seeing me, I understand something I didn't before. Sometimes the loudest, most devastating collapse in a family isn't the end. It's the beginning. A beginning built on truth, on boundaries, on clarity, on quiet, steady freedom. Adeline once told the world I was dead to her, but she had it backwards. That was the day I finally came back to life.